On this edition of News Analysis, we're looking at an annual event that brings millions of people onto the streets from east to west with a single slogan: support for the oppressed. International Quds Day, introduced by the late founder of Iran's Islamic Revolution, Imam Khomeini, is an opportunity for people everywhere to call for justice and to stand up for the rights of the Palestinian people, more than 60 years since they were forced out of their homeland and lost their state. Why is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict still an unresolved question? And how long should the world witness bloodshed in these territories? Joining me now live from London is Middle East expert Mr. Christopher Walker. In Virginia, Ms. Helena Kaban, a blogger with the Just World News, and in Beirut, Director of the Center for Middle East Studies, Mr. Hisham Jaber. I'd like to welcome you all on this edition of News Analysis, and I'll start my first question with Christopher Walker in London. Christopher, rallies have been held today in Iran, in Iraq, Gaza, the West Bank, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and even in the UK, where you are, yet almost zero coverage in the major Western media. Why?
Well, I think the trouble is that this question has been around so long, as you said, 60 years, and our media is absolutely swamped with what's going on in Libya at the moment, and there frankly is hardly any room for any other story. There has been some minor coverage of the huge explosion in Nigeria against the UN, which is of itself of great significance. But it's Libya, 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 and I'm afraid in that regard the Palestinian issue has not been able to edge its way in. I wouldn't say perhaps that people are bored by it, but they've heard it so often. The same thing happened, funnily enough, here in the Northern Ireland crisis. After that had been going on for about 25 years, the shooting of a British soldier hardly got any coverage at all. It's the media's desire for something new. I think you'll find that the demonstrations also were fairly peaceful today, just in case of some trouble in Egypt. And of course, TV cameras often seek out violence. But I think this neglect might change next month if indeed the UN should go ahead and declare a Palestinian state. That will be something new. The trouble is with this whole crisis, it's in stalemate. President Obama's made no progress. The Gaza sits as a sort of prison, and nothing happens. And that, I'm afraid, is not what the news editors want on our media outlets.
Well, let's go to Beirut now, Mr. Hisham Jaber. Mr. Jaber, how have the annual International Quds Day rallies influenced the Palestinian cause anyway? I mean, rather, what was the philosophy, do you think, behind Imam Khomeini's initial introduction of Quds Day more than 30 years on now? What have been the achievements?
Yes, of course, we cannot deny that it was some achievement in the last decades, and especially when the Islamic Republic of Iran and Imam Khomeini from the first day started to call for justice, especially in Palestine, and that has a lot of meaning based on the position of Iran in the Islamic world. And since the Arab countries, after Camp David, started to forget about Palestine and Palestinian rights. On the other hand, we had something positive, as we said, that many Islamic countries, non-Arabs, led by Iran, and made a very large campaign to show, through the mass media, the Palestinian rights. Especially since the Islamic Republic of Iran was born. And you cannot, but it came, slowly. On one side, you see the Arab countries, after Camp David, forgot about Palestine and Palestinian rights, and many other countries also were behind Egypt, and they forgot their duty, toward the Palestinian people, like the countries, called conservative or allied to the United States. Among the Arab countries, you see only Syria and in some respects Lebanon. And now Egypt, now, this year, after the revolution, we saw some a new movement in Egypt, and toward Palestinian rights and toward Jerusalem. And it was this Jerusalem Day this year was different than last year.
Well, Mr. Jaber, if I could just stop you there, if I may, because I want to move on with the thing you just raised there, and that's what makes this year's Quds rallies different from the years before that. We just saw pictures of Yemeni, Bahraini and Saudi protesters who are supporting the Palestinian cause, and of course these are countries which have been experiencing the part of the Arab Revolution. Helena, if I can come to you, how we're discussing this has become a day of protest against all forms of oppression now, especially as this year is coinciding with the Arab revolutions. Do you think that that is going to put more influence now on the Palestinian cause? The fact that these Arab countries who had dictators who were least to say silent on the Israeli policies now are supporting governments, are supporting future governments that would support the rights of the Palestinian people?
I think without a doubt the change in Egypt has been the most important factor because, of course, Egypt is by far the largest, weightiest, most populous Arab country, 85 million people, and right next to Israel. So the Mubarak presidency was always very protective of the peace agreement with Israel and actually collaborated largely with the Israelis in assuring the safety of Israel and policing the horrible blockade of Gaza. I was in Egypt and Gaza back in June, and it was really exciting to be in Egypt. Of course, what's happening there is still in flux. There's a lot of dynamism. There is also something of a counter-revolutionary movement, but still very small, I think. The revolutionary movement, both the Islamic part of it and the secular part of it is definitely still, very dynamic and moving and has completely changed Egypt's official relationship with Israel. Now, when I was in Gaza, it was for me, it's always very moving to be able to go to Gaza, and I feel very privileged to be able to do so. I went in across the Egyptian border. I talk to my friends in Gaza, and I tell them that as a Westerner, I'm able to go to Jerusalem. I'm able to go, and pray in my Christian holy places there, to visit my Muslim and Christian and Jewish friends in Jerusalem. And, sometimes they almost cry because there they are stuck in Gaza. And to me, that's the human aspect of this. It's a kind of it's a repression of people's human and spiritual instincts that hurts me a lot. Even my friends in Bethlehem, for example, I go and visit them. They're living.
Yeah, if I could just stop you there, if I may. Sorry for jumping in. Referring to the matter of Egypt that you just raised there, well, we know that Egypt, Christopher, if I could put this question to you, had a role in supporting the Israeli siege on the Gaza Strip, and Israel had that important gas deal, Egypt had rather the important gas deal with Israel at the same time, and we saw this support that Hosni Mubarak had for the Israeli side. Now with these developments that we are seeing in Egypt, as you may well know, the ongoing protests that we've been seeing in Egypt outside the embassy calling for the expulsion of the ambassador, calling for a cutting of ties even with Tel Aviv. Do you think that there is going to be a new Egypt that would drastically change things now, Israel, in the region?
I think that's the one good possibility for the Palestinians. Egypt, I lived there for many years, and it was amazing how unpopular the peace deal with Israel was with ordinary people. My driver used to open his window and spit every time we passed the Israeli embassy, which, as you know, a young man managed to scale 21 stories recently in this new wave of protests. And I think what you're going to see is that the people's view on the peace treaty is going to align more with whatever new government is finally formed, because it was Sadat and Mubarak who forced the issue with American encouragement. And I think that could be the most significant element to emerge from this. Egypt just hasn't got the enthusiasm for that peace treaty that's often been reflected in the media and by the spin doctors, and I think the Americans realise that. The Israelis certainly do, and they're worried about it. I don't know what they can do about it. There have been accusations inside Israel that the government's not really prepared for that. So at the moment, the peace deal limps along, but I don't think it's ever been in a more weak state since it was signed by President Sadat and Mr. Menachem Begin all those years ago.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the question of how concerned Israel is and what it's going to do about it. But first, Mr. Jaber, would you agree that there is the region is witnessing a new era in terms of relations between Arab regimes and the Israeli regimes because of the fact that we are seeing this anti-Israeli sentiments on the streets of these Arab countries?
Yes, of course. It's the beginning of a new era, starting now by Egypt. And what happened yesterday, it was significant. A simple Egyptian citizen, he jumped on the Israeli embassy and he took the Israeli flag and threw it away and put the Egyptian flag instead of it, was congratulated and supported by the administrator of the city of Cairo, was given a gift, was given a job, and was given a new apartment. If it was happened last year, this Egyptian citizen would be in the jail. It's something different, and also we have to explain that, of course, Sadat did sign Camp David, and for 30 years Mubarak made a friendship and was supported by Israel and was very close to Israel, and Israel made peace with the government and the regime of Egypt, but didn't achieve any peace with the people of Egypt, As your guest said, I remember every time I go to Cairo, I found these people in Egypt, and especially the new generation, had the nostalgia of the old time when Egypt was the leader of the Arab national, movement, and when Egypt was the first supporter of the Israeli rights. And now it happened. It's the beginning of a new era. We cannot say that from day one, from today, we did achieve what we want from Egypt. But I think Egypt now is going on the right way, and step by step, it will take its normal place, and the front to support justice and to support Palestinian rights and to make good relation with the friends of the Palestinian rights, like Islamic Republic of Iran, and also on the other countries, and like Tunisia, like Yemen, like now, what happened in Libya. I think the new regime in Libya cannot, be against the will of the population, and must be on its own rights. And now Syria, you see Syria is under pressure from everywhere. Why? Because Syria is refusing, to give, to leave its position against Israel and against Palestinian rights.
Right, let's see.
And I think...
Yes, sorry for jumping in. Let's see what Israel now is facing. Helen, if I can come to you. Speaking of the situation that Israel has been facing, we know after that attack, or the war rather, on Gaza, it did lose a lot of its credibility. Also after the attack on the Mavi Marmara, 9 Turkish activists killed there. A lot of condemnations coming. The crippling siege on Gaza, the fact that it's not lifted that siege. All of these condemnations, and then coming up next, the airstrikes that have been continuing on the Gaza Strip. And now the wave of the Arab revolutions and the anti-Israeli sentiments. Do you think that there is enough reason for Israel to be concerned? At the same time, it's also facing its internal crisis as well.
Well, I think, the Israelis have a lot of reasons to be concerned about the mobilization of the Arab publics and the mobilization of the Palestinian public. Let's not forget that the Fatah leadership of Abu Mazen has played a large role also in pacifying and policing Palestinian public opinion. So, now we have a much more mobilized set of generations coming up, And with the use of the social media, Palestinians, whether they're in Jerusalem or Gaza or Bethlehem or Lebanon or Jordan or wherever, they can all coordinate. And we've seen the beginning of those kind of new Palestinian movements back on May 15th. Next month, of course, we're going to see this move at the UN that you mentioned earlier with the declaration of a state. There's actually a lot of controversy about that in the Palestinian public. Many people say, look, we declared a state already in 1988 and all it led to was Oslo and that was a disaster. I think there's going to be a lot more emphasis on, people organizing, mass organizing in the streets, and the Israelis really don't know how to deal with that. Thus far, they have always just relied on the protection they've received from my government, sadly, here in the United States, that has, continued to funnel money and political support to Israel, even as they destroy the basis of Palestinian life in Jerusalem, and that's of great concern.
Right, something that Helen had raised there, quite interesting, Chris, if I could put this question to you, is the fact that she says Palestinians are not for, even some of them, the recognition of a state in Palestine, because what they say is that they want their homeland, what they want is what was taken away from them 60 years ago. So speaking of right now the situation in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the solutions that can be discussed now, do you think that something like the two-state solution can even be workable at this stage, although it's not, the two sides are not even going towards that solution anyway?
Not necessarily. It came up in your coverage of the Al-Quds Day speeches with Nasrallah in Lebanon saying, we don't want a two-state solution. The Palestinians must be given back all the land that they've lost. There are deep divisions inside Palestine, and I think this September issue might not be as clear-cut as we think. And of course, there's no doubt that the Americans are going to veto it in the Security Council, which means it'll probably go to the General Assembly of the UN and possibly get support there, but it'll lack the power of a Security Council resolution. But I think what it's going to do, despite the splits which are going to be pointed up, that like today, like Al-Quds Day in certain parts of the world, maybe not the British media, but in other parts of the world, has raised the consciousness of the Palestinian-Israeli issue. And ever since President Obama came to power declaring how important it was that it be solved and then promptly forgot it and did nothing about it, any time that it gets publicity is good for the Palestinians, and I think we will see that in September, because frankly you can't really believe it considering the enormity of the problem. But I'd say amongst many members of the public in the West, it's the forgotten issue. They sort of almost, their eyes glaze over and not that again. And that's got to be got over by the Palestinians. They must always freshen up their cause.
Yeah, Mr. Jaber, Christopher was also telling us earlier on that 60 years have passed, and that has caused some people to merely forget about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Speaking of the solutions that this issue is facing now, even recognition by the UN General Assembly of a Palestinian state, people would be saying, is it going to help the Palestinian cause? There's no discussions going forward on a two-state solution even. We've got the illegal settlement constructions continuing. No concession coming from the side of Israel on the issue of Jerusalem al-Quds or the return of refugees. So what is lying ahead for the Palestinians, do you think? What have they been able to achieve throughout these years, and will they be able to achieve what they want?
First of all, we have to recognize that Palestinian unity is a must. The Palestinians must be united before they go to the General Assembly. Of course, we are optimistic and we are expecting more than 130 countries will vote to recognize a Palestinian state. But if the Palestinians, Hamas and the authority are both united and they go to the United Nations with one voice, with one representative, and with one policy, and with one political speech, I think it would help a lot. And even the United States is not very happy with this recognition, and maybe it will do its best what it can do to disturb it. But if, believe me, if more than 100 countries or nations in the world will vote for Palestinian state, what's the position of the United States? That means the United States is very weak. It cannot do more than it did, in cooperation with Israel. And it's step by step. We have to look at the future and to see, and especially to hire a very large mass media campaign to support the Palestinian rights. The Arabs, must be also the Arabs, and the Arab League, now start to move with the new administration, and especially what happened, as we said at the beginning, in the Arab world, like revolution. I think all Arab governments must apply positively to the feeling of their people.
Well,
and you see the Islamic world.
Just stop you there, because we're running out of time, and I'd like to put the last minute for Helena to speak for us before we say goodbye. Helena, as the last comments, how close do you think the Palestinians have come to reaching their ideals?
I think they're still very far from reaching their ideals. You go to Jerusalem, and the city, Palestinian life in the city is getting degraded day by day, and that's very tragic. On the other hand, so many Palestinians, against the odds, have remained on their land, both inside 1948 Israel and in Gaza and in the West Bank. And that's been a huge achievement. And then Palestinians in exile, in the Arab countries, in the West, in South America, they haven't forgotten who they are. They haven't integrated and assimilated into the countries. They still, they love Jerusalem, they want Palestine, and they're working for it all around the world. So over the long haul, I'm very optimistic.
Helena Caban from Virginia, blogger with Just World News. Thanks very much, Helena, for your comments. A big thank you as well to Middle East expert Christopher Walker in London, and Mr. Hisham Jaber, Director of the Centre for Middle East Studies, joining us live from Beirut. Thanks so much for staying with us. I'm afraid we've run out of time. From me, Homa Lezgi, and our team here in Tehran, it's goodbye.